In five.
In one. Hey, friends, welcome to Thru Port Collective. We're glad to have you this evening, and it's a week that we've been looking forward to as we have Paul Vo on. And before we get into the thick of things here, we just want to say a few things up top. Again, if you remember, hit the like button. We're not trying to become YouTube influencers or anything like that. We don't really care, but we would love to have more people in the collective. And this show is really about helping musicians and musicians helping one another to create great music. And so that's kind of been our goal, and that helps us get us there. Before we get to Paul, I want to, we were just talking before the show, and one thing I think we have had quite a few new people, and not everybody, we kind of talk as though everybody knows who we are, and we're not really anybody, but we talk as though you guys already know us. And so I thought it might take just a few seconds to introduce my co-hosts and myself, and tell you who we are. And we've got Marshal Arnold in the top corner there, and Marshall is a trance and techno artist from the Tampa area, and has an unbelievably incredible synth collection and makes fantastic music. In fact, if you're interested in that stuff, I would really recommend checking out one of our previous episodes where Marshall does a studio tour for us and talks about how he makes music, and also his staging of his live room. And it's really, it was a great episode. So also in the description box, you can find links to our channels too. So if you want to check out more of his music. Tim Grogan is a Nashville pro drummer by day, does a lot of studio work, gigs with all sorts of incredible musicians. Some of the people that he's played of are quite well known, and he's an amazing drummer. But by night, he plays in a band called the Pin Jones Conspiracy, which I highly recommend checking out. And also is a modular synthesis, as you can see from his background. And my name is Cryss Smith. You probably know me online as Cryss Synthient, but I'm a Southern California guitarist. So I was a pro guitarist, also repair gear, and do all sorts of stuff, sound design, and whatever little things can bring in a little bit of income. But I do a lot of stuff like rock and also some synth music as well. So that's who we are. And again, we just kind of came together to really have a place where we're not just geeking about new releases, but we're actually talking about how we can make better music. And so we are really honored to have Paul Vo with us tonight. And Paul, you've done had so many cool inventions, and are a really interesting person. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your background and who you are.
Well, who I am, yes, that's a question. Um, I guess we could go back to when I was in California. I was the director of R&D at QSC Audio. That company, we were doing pro audio systems, and things like distributed sound with amplifiers and speakers, and digital signal processing that used a special kind of Ethernet connection to distribute sound. So, things like big stadiums, hotels, places where you had to have the sound synchronized in certain ways, theme parks where you've got hundreds and hundreds of channels. There's a little bird tweeting in a tree, and that's a particular channel, and then some sounds in the somewhere else, and all of that is managed on screen. So I worked on those kinds of systems with a team of just great engineers. And I did that until 2004. The problem well, it's not really a problem. I mean, it was a great opportunity. It was fantastic. I learned how to develop products for the worldwide market, how to do things really professionally. But what's missing is that I was working on other people's ideas, other people's product ideas, and I'm a guitarist, and so I had always dreamed of doing things for the guitar, sort of combining my technical knowledge with the guitar to explore what can be done with strings. And so anyway, in 2004, I left, and I worked for about 4 years on a system, a way of actually controlling the vibration of a guitar string, of any string really, but mostly I'm focused on the guitar. Probably still today, a lot of people think that my products are basically sustainers, and they certainly do sustain. But the difference between my stuff and a sustainer like an EBO or some of the other sustainers is that the technology I developed actually controls the vibration of the string, so I can change the harmonic structure of a string in a way that's similar to, analogous to the way you change harmonics in a synthesizer. And I can show you some of that a little bit later on, because I do have a Vo-96 here. I can show you, what I mean when I'm talking about that. So anyway, I did that, and then I had a prototype, and I took it to the Summer NAMM show. I guess I took it there and showed it around, and I got the usual kind of response where hey, that's really interesting, but it's it's kind of out there, and so I didn't really get any traction. And then on my way back, I decided that I would just phone Moog Music and see what they had to say. And then I ended up on my way back driving into Moog Music, and I met Mike and Cyril Lance, and Cyril, of course, is a guitarist. And make a long story short, we did a deal, and they licensed the technology, and they also asked me to develop the product for them. So that was the Moog guitar, and that was just a really, really interesting. It was an amazing time of life, really. I'd walked around for years with this idea, and I would be talking to members of my team or whoever, and I'd say, what I really want to do is this thing for guitar strings, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do that, and the first time somebody hears that, it's but when they hear it, and then the next year they hear it, and the next year they hear it, they start to think, maybe you're just a little, off the page on that particular thing. Hey, the guy's a good engineer, he's a good manager, he's doing great work here, but you get him on that subject, and he's talking about this thing that doesn't exist, probably never will exist. And then, of course, I finally did it. And the difference between having an idea floating around in your head and actually doing it and being able to show people is something that you don't really realize until you have that experience. I mean, it's just so it was just a fascinating time. I met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Moog is, of course, very, very connected with the artist community. So I just met so many people, and I'm really bad with artist names. I mean, I met all kinds of people that I should remember exactly who they were, but I can't. I certainly met Brian Eno, and Brian Eno has a Moog guitar, and on the CD, the Lux CD, that CD is, of course, I can't remember the guitarist's name. Abrams. I'd have to look it up. Great guitarist, but he and Brian Eno worked on that CD, and it's a combination of orchestra and Moog guitar, and you would really have a difficult time telling, which was which. It just blends into this very interesting sound that they created. So all of these things that you would just never expect to be part of, suddenly opened up. So then after that, I basically I want to be an inventor. I never really wanted to have a company and to be manufacturing things. I wasn't trying to start a new company. I just wanted to get to a place where I could continue working on new ideas, with the hope that the new ideas would be absorbed. And that hasn't happened yet to the degree that I would like it to. The guitarist community right now, sort of at the leading edge, is starting to become, this is, I see this as a very positive thing. They're starting to become fascinated with hex processing, where each individual string is listened to, and then you can apply different processing to the different strings, or you can process the strings separately, which means that you can strike a harmonically complex chord and get a wall of sound that isn't actually distorted with intermodulation the way, if you do it through a single channel fuzz box, you get that sound. So this is a more harmonious sound. Yes. Sorry,
Paul. No, you're good. I have so many questions, and you're welcome to waffle on as much as you want. But
I can waffle, man.
As the British seem to say, waffle on. But I was just curious. Was what got you interested? You were a guitar player, you said. So something got you interested in the technological end of things, which you already had a foot in that world, and then you had a foot in the musical world. So obviously that was a bridge there. And but at some point you decided to kind of go for it. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how that went and how Moog was maybe potentially instrumental in that, because because that's kind of what you were just talking about and just hitting on, I think, is where you didn't really want to run a company. You wanted to
I wanted to license my technology to
technology.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
The Moog was really perfect in that respect. The thing was that this giant wave came over the entire industry, which was this wave of vintage analog synthesizers. And before that happened, Moog was very interested in going in the direction that I offered, but then when the vintage synth wave came, I think quite rightly they had to say, well, we are obviously front and center in this, and this is what we have to do. So they didn't, we did the Moog guitar and everything for probably, I think it went on for about 4 years in various forms. And then they decided not to renew the contract, and they just put all their efforts into the vintage synthesizer thing that has really carried on for a decade now.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. That's just a timing thing, really, ultimately.
It's really a timing thing. It seemed in the recession that followed the 2008 stuff, the banking collapse and all that, during that, the Moog guitar, I know, really helped the company because it was an exciting new product, and it was a good thing. But then when the synth wave came in, they just had to make, the logical business decision. So what I did was I kind of scratched my head and I thought, well, what do I do? We had been working on the Vo-96 device, and we'd been sort of collaborating, and Moog was offering some support, and I was just full-time focused on that. And so when Moog didn't renew their contract, I was able to go ahead with the Vo-96, and we had this great Kickstarter. And with lots of help from my friends in Asheville, we launched this Kickstarter, and the Vo-96 was a pretty expensive product. I won't go into all the details. If somebody wants to go up on Kickstarter and look for the Vo-96, the project.
Well, we've got some short video we should maybe even cut to to a couple things as we want, right?
Yeah.
Fun to maybe see those things. But everyone in the chat, if you have questions for Paul, I see a lot of people are talking about Wand and different things. So this is cool. So chime in and ask questions, please, because we have the man on the show. So let us know if you got any questions about that.
Do we want to just play a little bit of this video that I had pulled up?
Yeah. Just which one is that?
Okay.
What do you have?
Pull it up here.
He had a hat. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Play a little bit of that. This is
set it up.
This is Richard Smith at a private concert that he did, and this is after the end of the concert, and I showed him the Vo-96, and it's just he and I and some other people in the big room, and he's playing it for the first time.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, this is from some sort of small handheld device that we're hearing the audio from. But the interesting thing, this guy plays beautiful guitar.
Yeah,
but to hear the before and after of him turning on the Vo-96.
The guitar the way it is before anything happens. The electronics is off.
There it is.
And now?
It's like an organ.
That's so crazy.
It has a lot of different settings. That's probably the simplest.
Okay, what else? This is pretty unreal.
We can modulate these settings.
So just to cut in here for a second, because we're used to hearing electric guitars play through effects and all sorts of interesting things happening in the electronic realm. But what we're hearing from this video is his Vo-96 on an acoustic guitar. The acoustic guitar is not plugged in. We're just hearing it acoustically. It's a physical process. It's pretty amazing.
Now, if you listen carefully what's happening.
I can hear like organ sounds, harmonics and everything happening.
That's crazy.
So there's a little taste of it.
That's amazing. That's just so cool.
So tell us about this Vo-96 and what it does and how it's unique.
Well, I have one here. Maybe I should hold it up in front of me and
do that.
So yeah, I've got a tight strap here so I can fit into my spot. In my work area, I like to be surrounded by horizontal surfaces, which doesn't leave a whole lot of room for guitars and stuff. So you turn it on, by touching down here, and it comes on. It's got these lights and things. And
we like lights and things.
Yeah. So do I. This is very experimental. I mean, it kind of looks like you found this alien thing on a crashed flying saucer or something, and brought it home, and it just crawled over and attached itself to your acoustic guitar. It's just very strange that way.
So maybe for because we have a lot of synth players watch the show. Maybe I'll explain. This is just a stock acoustic guitar, a regular acoustic guitar, and it's that electronic piece that you have near the sound hole that's the device.
Yes, that's right. And the sounds that we're going to make here, the sound system of the guitar is not even plugged in. But if you did plug it in, you'd just hear the amplified version, through the piezo saddle pickup, just exactly what we're going to hear acoustically. But what you're going to hear is made acoustically, and things sound different because the strings are physically vibrating in a different way. So let's see, how can I address this in a coherent way. All right. Well, so if I just strum this, now that's forever, so we can talk about sustain. I also have the opposite of sustain, which actually mutes the strings. And let me just turn the whole deal off for a second, so you can hear what the guitar sounds on its own. So that's that.
That's crazy.
And then muted, you can hear it's suppressed. And then when I go in this direction, and then so that's really sort of all the harmonics. Now, these are the even harmonics. That sounds like a tone control, but it's not actually. It's actually moving a window across the available harmonics. So it's actually changing the way the string physically sounds, as though it was a tone control, but it's changing the harmonic balance of what's physically going on the string. So that's the even harmonics. And then here we have the odd harmonics. Now what's going on there is the even harmonics, I'm driving the fundamental, and then the second, the fourth, the sixth, the eighth, etc., and actually suppressing the odd numbered harmonics. And then with the odd harmonics, I'm doing the opposite. I'm suppressing the even harmonics and driving the odd harmonics. So if we switch back and forth between those two extremes, you can hear this interesting thing. It's even, odd, even, odd. Same strings. I'm not doing anything else, just changing the spectra of the system. Then there's modulators. So with a modulator, now we're playing with the harmonic structure.
That is crazy. That is crazy.
So at this extreme, this will go on forever. But when I'm playing it, I like to let it fade a little bit, because the fades are really nice, and you can make the fade just as long as you want. Anything from forever to very short. It's got a really nice fade characteristic if you adjust it to fade. Let's see what else I have in here. Oh yeah, okay. So there's some throat singing on the guitar. So I'm just playing one note, and the system is playing that little melody by energizing the sequence of harmonics on a note the fundamental is sustaining underneath.
I'm sorry, Paul, but that's just mind blowing. What you're just kind of going through it like it's like no big deal, but like to literally understand that that's just the guitar and the strings vibrating with this energy, this electromagnetic or electromagnetic energy, right? So I mean,
yeah.
What?
It's very, very precise control of electromagnetic energy.
That's super badass.
Actually, as an aside, the one of the very interesting gigs that I've done that is outside the music industry over the last few years is something for the medical industry, where I'm using the same, well, not the same, but a similar kind of thing, which involves the precise control of magnetic fields in order to make possible a medical device that can be used to monitor the healing of things like joint replacements, elbows, knees, hips, that sort of thing. And wow. It just happens to rely on very, very precise control of electromagnetism, which is kind of what I do. So I was able to, get that gig, which is very interesting. It's completely different from the music industry. Can't possibly be any different.
There's been some crossover.
In the chat wants to know, when's the warp drive coming?
Well, I only work on that in my sleep and at certain other times where I might be doing things that are marginally frowned upon in some quarters. The warp drive is a long way off.
Actually, here's a more real question, which is, what about the Vo-96? Is it still for sale, or will it be again in the future?
It's not. I made. I think I actually sold 96 of them. Now, the reason it's called the Vo-96 is because it's got 6 strings, and each string has 16 virtual controllers. So it controls 16 harmonics per string. There's 6 strings, so that's 96. So it's Vo-96. And I did a run of 100, and 4 of them were sort of unrecoverably unworking, and 96 of them went out there, and they are out there. People are using them. I know there's a fellow in Australia who has been winning awards for film music, and he's using his. Every now and then I get emails from people who are really enjoying them and continue to use them. Just recently, there was a fellow in, where was he? Denmark, I think. He may be on the chat. He was gonna. He did get a message letting him know that this was happening, or maybe he'll watch it later. But it's kind of late at night or early in the morning over there. He got a used one, bought it from someone else, and then contacted me to sort of help him try to integrate it into this guitar that he was making. Several people bought them and made electric instruments, solid body instruments with them, which made me really nervous because it meant they had to do, things with the electronics. But actually, they all did a really good job, and so there's a bunch of solid body instruments out there. Gabriel Marine of Consider the Source had a dual neck made with 2 Vo-96s on it, and he still tours and plays with that. So it's been a great success from the point of view of the artists that I have given this to and the feedback that I've gotten from those artists, what hasn't happened so far is no enterprising ballsy company has contacted me saying, we'd like to do something with this technology, because that just hasn't happened yet. And I hope it does. I'm sure there will be something like this eventually, but I'm just one guy and I'm the inventor. And what this really needs is it needs a company that is a manufacturing organization, a company that's already in the music business, to step up and deliver this. There's definitely a market for it. I get asked the question you asked me, are there any more of these for sale? I get asked that all the time, and there just aren't. It's too difficult for me to make. It's it's an expensive item, and it's just I have to put out a lot of money and a lot of time to make them. And I just don't want to be a manufacturer. I have ideas that I'm working on. That's what I want to be doing with my time. But I would love for a manufacturer to get a hold of this and satisfy some of the market demand that I know is out there. You'd think it would happen,
I'm kind of curious.
When you start out as inventor, you're really worried that people are going to take your inventions,
Mm.
And that's sort of the
that never happens.
Yeah.
Well, no one ever steals.
What I've found is I'm walking down the middle of the street yelling, exploit me, and
well, Cryss, you had a question, right? Jump in there.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because I totally understand though. Like, you want to spend your time designing and creating.
Yeah.
And the problem is that if you have a product, you've got to worry about all these other things like marketing and production and quality control and all these things that usually a very creative people don't want to deal with, because they're quite time consuming. They take you away from that creative process and dealing with all those things. So it was kind of an interesting thing that it was Moog that had you had the most successful luck with Moog. They weren't a guitar company at that point, it was a synthesizer company, and it's kind of an odd, in one way it's odd because they weren't a guitar company and you're selling the guitar technology, but in another way it really fit because Bob Moog was a person like you that was a very creative guy and that wanted to push things into the future. What kind of what was the response from guitar companies and in the guitar world? Of course we know about like sustainers like the Ebo and the Fernandez sustainer, which when I first started watching the videos on your project, I'm like, okay, I have a fundamental understanding of what this does, but then the kind of things that like the Vo-96 does or the Wand and go way just so much further beyond that. What are the biggest challenges in the guitar world for these kind of products?
Well, honestly, they're very conservative, and I can understand why, because guitarists, possibly with present company accepted, I guess, are also mostly very conservative. Their lifestyles might be the least conservative thing you could imagine. But when it comes to their instrument, they want the guitar that Eric Clapton played, or Jimi Hendrix played, and they want the Marshall tube amp, and that's what has been the case.
Yeah.
But there is emerging, new guitarists, younger guitarists who have a real interest in experimenting and trying new things. And it's on the synth side, synthesizers are just, they're full of knobs and dials, and people are spending, serious money acquiring these devices and playing with them and really enjoying the technology. and that's just a very different mindset than has sort of been dominant among guitar players. And I think that's starting to shift. I mean, I think it's fair to say that I have, I've been kind of ahead of my time. I should really go into suspended animation and wake up in a couple of decades, and maybe that'd be a lot easier to get my traction going. But I don't mind. I mean, I'm good. I enjoy what I do. I'm able to pursue my ideas, and I just hope that at some point some company's going to step up and do something.
Could I jump in there and talk about traditional instruments and gatekeepers for those instruments
Sure.
in regards not to guitars but drums, because there's sort of a similar thing with those crowds, I would say. I think guitars might be the biggest one that really want to keep. There's the thing, man, don't mess with it, and it is all about guitar plus, amp plus cab equals sound, and there's a purist thing about it and there's a gatekeeper thing about it. But in the drum world, there's kind of a similar thing, I must say. Here's where it probably differs in that I think drums were the first instrument to be emulated in a way that was kind of frightening from a technological standpoint, that you could be replaced as a drummer with drum machines. I think that was the first kind of thing where it was like, whoa, no, you want a real drummer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure that's, I mean, I witnessed it, I lived it, because I had to actually adopt, and chose to even willingly adopt, drum machines and learn how to play them, program them, and just think of them as an extension of what I did rather than as a threat to my livelihood. But a lot of cats thought, nah, man, that's they're trying to take our gig,
What would you say has been the effect of that revolutionary device, really, when it came out? What has happened to drummers as percussionists, as musicians? I mean, are there more people now, less people? How has that technology changed your perception of the business from that point of view?
Yeah, it's a great question, and again, I did live it.
Yeah.
For a second, I wondered if that was going to be a positive or a negative evolution, but pretty quickly I noticed that it could be a positive thing, especially if we could, as drummers, get on the page about embracing the technology and just think of it differently. Instead of being resistant to it, embrace it and just kind of go, what can I do with this? It's really cool. This is so different from being a drummer, and yet you can play it like drummers. So a lot of artists would call me actually to program drum machines as a drummer would play. There's obviously another side to that coin, which would be, just a stream of eighth notes, with, whatever underneath it that's impossibly physically to play.
Yeah.
And also, and also just dynamics zero and all of that, just everything's right. The same level. So this was refresh or fresh sounding rather, because that didn't exist before. So a long time ago, that was oh, interesting. So I think what it's ended up doing, just to get to your question a little quicker, is that what has happened is I think it's made acoustic drummers better, and I think it's made drum machines and programming and sampling and all of that better. I think it's integrated the two things in a way that would never have happened without the invention of the drum machine, etc. So I think what's happened is it's drummers play a little bit more like machines, or at least they know how to. And I think that machines can play with more feel and more, swing, and there's so many things about it. More like a human maybe might play. So really, rather than it being this frightening negative moment in the career of someone who was trying to be, a drummer all his life, it ended up becoming this positive thing, and I'm super happy I just embraced it, because it could have gone the other way. But to answer your question, I think it's been super positive influence in both directions, and just kind of opened up the doors to other possibilities in the way of percussion and drum set and anything related. Yeah. So I hope that answers. But yeah.
I'm just got the beginnings of a children's book called Timmy versus the 808, and it starts with young Timmy and his little snare drum being like at odds with this 808.
They're going to ban that book, man.
But at the end of the book, I mean,
in school libraries.
I mean, that's it goes through it. But at the end of the book, it ends with young little Timmy making music with the 808 and his acoustic drums, and everything works out.
Happy ending.
Happy ending.
This brings up the concern over music AI. Is the music AI is like the giant descendant of the drum machine, just but it could have exactly the same future. It's to hear a good drummer play, and I've heard you play, a good drummer has a musical soul. It's a beautiful and amazing thing, and it doesn't matter if it's coming out of the machine. It's just the interest is not there, because it's a human being doing this thing. That's why you want to pay attention. Otherwise, you've got your ear pressed against the laundry machine, and it's you're not saying to the laundry machine, "Wow, man, you got soul," listen to that, it's
by the way, I've emulated a washing machine in my playing. So.
You can
and a Harley Davidson. It's very metal.
Yeah, I believe you.
I'm not kidding. Not even kidding. Yeah.
I used to dream about the sound of certain sports cars just like ripping through the road, and just the sound of that engine, up at a high RPM. I wanted my guitar to sound like that, and now there are a few tracks where Hendrix got that sound, I thought, and I thought that was great. He was certainly a big inspiration for me. But the whole music AI thing, I think it's just like it's a powerful tool, but I'm hoping it turns into an idea machine. I don't, there's certain areas like the side of music production where you're producing music which is required to have a certain emotional feel relative to something else that's going on, in a commercial or something like that. And, you want sad music, and you kind of want to, you want to tell the AI, you need this, that, and the other thing. And it's going to produce a sort of an imitation of that. And that, in that situation, that may be all that you want. But there's other situations where you're paying attention to the artist. We have MIDI. You take a keyboard player you take a keyboard player and you can midify that performance, and then you can crank up the tempo on the MIDI, and suddenly you have like the most amazing keyboard player, except it's not a real keyboard player, so you're not interested. We're interested in Eddie Van Halen as a guitarist because he's really, really fast, and there's all kinds of guys now that are amazingly fast. But we're not listening to MIDI guitar being played at twice that tempo because it's uninteresting. What we're interested in is the human connection, the encoding of the human experience and the human emotion transmitted to the listener through the music. And that I do not think AIs are anywhere near being conscious. This is actually something that worries me just in a general sense. I'm not worried about AIs becoming conscious. I'm worried about human beings convincing themselves that they're no more conscious than an AI is. That's that's the opposite direction. It's like, oh yeah, okay, this thing is giving me responses that are kind of like I'd expect from a person. So how do I know that that's not all I am as a person? And there's
oh my God,
there's actual thinking in that direction. Like there's a segment of us may talk ourselves out of our own sense of sentience. It may go the other way. So this is
Cryss.
All right. Anyway, that's what I have to say about that. I hope.
Well,
Sorry.
It is a philosophical thing. Marshall, jump in, man, because you've been sitting there, very patient. But I know you've got things. You've got you've got things to say.
Yeah, I don't know much about this stuff, so I'm just kind of soaking it all up right now, in terms of what Paul's done and like the things that he's made. I'm interested that somebody was asking earlier about the wand and the.
Yeah, I should talk about that. I've been working on a product. It's actually called the EMpick, and before that it was called the Wand 2, and I've been working on it for the longest time. And people have been actually very patient with me. And part of it is because, I am an inventor. And, as time goes on, better ideas occur to me. And so I'm sort of compulsively changing the way I'm doing the thing to make it better. But the events that have sort of enabled me to, or given me that opportunity to rethink the invention, because usually I try and go forward pretty quickly and capture, what I have, and then leave the new ideas for the next thing. A number of things happen, just like a succession of weird things, like I was going to put a lithium ion cell into it, like a little custom cell. And then the laws around that changed. And I realized that, for what I wanted to do, not being a manufacturer, it was just what I wanted to do was not legal unless I spent a whole lot of money getting all kinds of approvals for having a custom lithium battery in a product. So I had to redesign it to use an off-the-shelf battery. And then Donald Trump decided to put a 25% tariff on chips, which basically completely spoiled my business case. And so I had to go looking for a way to, save some money on the device. That was another thing. And then, of course, there was the pandemic and the lockdowns, and the world absolutely stopped. And, I didn't know what was going to happen then. And what a lot of people that aren't in the electronics industry don't know is that the pandemic was followed by a 2-year period, which is still out there to a degree, where you could not get your hands on certain chips at all, not even one.
Oh, yeah.
It was, they called it the chip shortage. It wasn't a shortage. There just weren't any. You could not find them. And, and so I'm like working on this thing, and I'm thinking, well, why am I doing this? And there's, frankly, if things were to heat up geopolitically, and we had some of the problems around Taiwan that, some people think may happen, it'll be right back there, because the way the chip industry works, everything kind of goes through a few special places. And if those places are compromised in some way, it's a freeze. And of course, the large companies with tremendous buying power, like Apple and so forth, Apple recently bought, I think, the entire output of a semiconductor plant for the next year and a half. So, something like that. I don't remember the exact details, but, so that just leaves little dribbles of chips available for tiny boutique inventor types. And for 2 years, there just weren't any. So, there's just been delay after delay after delay. Right now, I am waiting to get the latest and I hope greatest circuit board back so I can test, the MPic that I believe I'm going to finally be able to ship. So that's the status of the MPic. But man, it's been it's not like I've worked on that 24/7. I also did this medical thing, in the middle of that, and several other things, a couple of interesting things for other creative inventors in the musical field too. So I've been busy with a lot of different things, but the MPic is coming. How do I feel about how late it is? I feel ridiculous, frankly, but it's coming.
Yeah, so. just stay the course. I mean,
yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah. It's so hard. Like we're all a little bit crazy for doing what we do to begin with. Thinking we can make a living and we can is the which makes it even crazier. We actually can do this to some extent. So it's cool. I mean, obviously we're all a champion of you and what you're up to. So that's that's awesome. Just keep that up. Don't worry about the rest of it. The rest of it will fall into place. And,
I want to say that what I just demonstrated, well, with the Moog guitar and then the Vo-96, that is a controller that has, to my mind, a severe non-ideality, which is that it won't handle fat strings. Like it won't work with a bass guitar. The strings are too fat. It won't handle strings that are the kinds of strings that guitarists most favor, like nickel-plated strings. The nickel has a different magnetic property that interferes with the behavior of the control system. So you need different strings. So the sort of region of application is a little limited. So the new controller that I've been working on all this time doesn't have those limitations. So I think maybe this now is really close to the perfect controller in that it can be applied to anything that is magnetic, that has a resonance. If you tap on it and you hear a tone and you can stick a magnet to it, you can extract that tone with the MPic. And speaking of drums, Tim, a drum surface is this wonderful membrane that has all kinds of vibratory nodes on it, as you know. So if I was to put a little tiny, piece of steel, something that a magnet will stick to, if I was to glue that to, a drum, and then approach that with the MPic, you would be able to sustain and get tones out of your drum, and then you'd be able to change the tones by physically manipulating the surface of the drum skin, interfering with certain nodes and promoting certain other nodes. It's going to be a nice space.
What if you could do that with any resonant surface or anything found?
Well, you can't.
A glass or right. So I mean, you could use that technology on pretty much anything that has a resonant quality whatsoever.
You just have to stick a little piece of metal on there with a good adhesive like Crazy Glue, and it doesn't even have to be metal. It could be a piece of glass.
Right, or anything, right?
It can be a drum skin. It can be anything at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that kind of even sort of blows the doors open too on a different application, that could be possible. Whereas it's just a couple of pickups, and or inducers, I guess. And you could like put them on a marimba, or you could put them on a wine glass, or you could
marimba.
Put them on,
I've definitely thought of marimba. Yeah,
like,
that would be amazing.
Just whatever, like anything that has a resonant quality whatsoever, you could use that technology and use it for. That's kind of neat, especially if it were something that doesn't have to be glued on necessarily or whatever, but like you could move it around. Like, let me try it on this. Oh, let me try it on that. Here's my sliding glass back door. And
Actually, that's right.
It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Let me bring this one up too, since it's on topic. But Robert asked about it being implemented on a Steinway Grand. I answered, but as far as like the current technology, but what would be your take on that? Is there some way to do it? Because with the piano, you were mentioning that like with bass guitar strings are too big for it, and I'd imagine that some of the piano strings would be a little too big for that. And also with the pianos having multiple strings per note. But is there some way to incorporate that technology into piano type instruments?
Well, I believe the controller that I'm waiting for circuit boards on now, the EMpick controller, will be able to do all of that. But even the wand, I've been moving in this direction of a generalized controller. The wand can do bass guitar strings and piano strings, and there are people out there that have used it that way. There's one artist in particular, and of course I have a ridiculous block against her name. It'll come to me. Who has incorporated that into in her performance. And but if you Google electromagnetically enhanced piano, you'll find that there are some inventors out there who have essentially built sort of powerful EBO type systems that don't actually control the string, but they certainly do sustain the string. And they have there's some YouTube videos out there, and amazing videos that you can listen to. And some of them, again, they are boutique products. I don't know if they would make some. It's going to be a very expensive proposition, because for piano you need a thing for each string. So there's a lot of hardware in there. But that's been done. My technology would offer a lot more flexibility if it was applied to piano, but to the best of my knowledge, it never has been. But other more EBO like sustainers rather than controllers have been applied. It's out there.
I want to jump in and say, because Chris Stack is now in. Well, he may have been in the chat for a minute, but Chris Stack, and I know Paul, you guys are familiar with one another.
Sure, yeah.
But with on Chris's channel, or I guess it's his channel, Experimental Synth, I noticed that he was using a Vo wand to excite a kalimba.
Yes.
And that was really cool. It was really, really neat. I don't happen to have that clip just sitting around, but that was really, really cool. And it just shows the fact that it's any vibrating surface, anything that can vibrate, this just induces it. So it's really cool what he did. And of course, he had a little H9 on it or something. I can't remember. He had some sort of eventide effects on it. Sounded amazing and was very musical and very cool. But it was like a real cool, like, not guitar expression of it. But yeah, I would love it if you do some.
Incoming.
You got it? Incoming.
Yeah, incoming. Just a second.
While that's incoming, I just want to mention that it's Holly Bowling, who is just a great piano player and fills big venues playing for people. And she has been using the wand, which is pictured right there, in her performances for quite some time. She actually uses two of them to drive piano strings with a sustain while she does some other interesting things.
Let's check this out.
Let her rip.
Let it rip. We might not have sound.
I'm not hearing sound.
I'm not hearing any sound.
Let me figure that out then. My apologies.
Oh no, not at all. You jumped on it and found it. Good job there.
See, share screen. What did I do wrong? Oh, okay, there we
go. I can tell you that even with the Vo-96, it'll work on a 12-string guitar. So it's not limited to just one string. It'll drive 3 strings.
Ah, this is cool.
Sound to get out of a kalimba.
I know, it's amazing. Yeah. There you go.
That's And
but there it is in action. Yeah.
We were talking in the chat too, like Aaron was bringing it up, that like hearing it just on the acoustic guitar sound incredible, and Aaron's comment was like, this would sound incredible with some delay and some reverb and things like that, and that's what Cryss did, and it does sound incredible.
So just to sort of put a bow on the technology explanation, many people are familiar with the idea that you can take any sound and decompose the sound using Fourier analysis into essentially a collection of sine waves, and then you can take that collection of sine waves and add them all together to reproduce the sound that you started with, and that's actually a form of synthesis that's known as additive synthesis, where you can actually build up very complex sounds by adding the individual harmonics in the form of sinusoidal waves, just summing them all together and controlling their amplitudes, and with that, it's like a set of paints that you can paint any picture with. You can create virtually any sound, any timbre that can be heard and analyzed. You can create using additive synthesis. Well, it's possible to do that on a guitar string or on a bass string or on any other thing that vibrates, that has multimodal vibrational capabilities like a guitar string does. A guitar string is an amazing thing. I mean, it can create standing waves of a whole series of harmonics, and so if you can control those harmonics, you can create any kind of timbre that you want. So that's what I want to do. It's kind of we've called it acoustic synthesis. It's physical mechanical synthesis, a form of music synthesis that happens right on the physical medium of the guitar string. That's sort of the elevator. It's a long elevator ride, but that's the elevator summary of the technology.
Well, yeah, and that's good, because I think people tend to think of synthesis, and at least in the electronic world, and within synthesizers and oscillators and there's a lot of jokes that like, well, the guitar is like a 6-voice synthesizer, string synthesizer, in a way. But then when you consider all these possibilities that you have with it, and for synthesis, and I think what you said about guitarists is very true. For the large part, being very conservative. I mean, in the late '80s, I think things got kind of progressive with gear. But then there was the back to the vintage stuff in the 90s. And it does seem like maybe in the last 10 or 15 years, 10 years, let's say, that there's been a little more experimentation, a little more looking towards the future with guitars in terms of, all sorts of modeling and effects, but also in music styles. Like I noticed that, I don't know, like maybe around 2008 or 2010 or so, that all of a sudden there was all these videos popping up with guitarists doing ambient music that really, if you put it on and you didn't know it was a guitar, you wouldn't have known it was a guitar. It sounded a lot like synthesizers. And then they were starting to employ techniques with their effects and everything else to kind of get into a space that guitar didn't really occupy too much. So it's kind of interesting to see, now that they're, and as you said too, perhaps the younger guitarists are a little more keen to explore those areas where they're not so set into, it's kind of a funny thing. You mentioned Jimi Hendrix, and like Jimi Hendrix was very forward-looking, or Eddie Van Halen, trying to find out new ways to do things and new experimental things using feedback and different ways to play the guitar. But then we get couple generations of guitarists that go, yeah, they were so revolutionary, but we won't accept anything else new. That was it. The door's closed.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it. And and I love all that music. I mean, it's not that. It's just that they opened up so many possibilities that it's like nobody else wanted to be outside of that in any way. It was felt that nothing more was needed other than what they had done. And and a lot of people really just wanted to emulate that sound and that capability, and they used that same gear. And I guess that's true in synth world too. Is there's certain synthesizers that everybody seems to own as kind of the basic gear. And I don't know what those are. I keep seeing these red Nord things everywhere. Everybody seems to have one of those, no matter what else they have.
Red Nord things.
Probably the Nord stage.
Is that an accurate statement? Is that like this thing that everybody must have? The Nord.
Well,
I think the Nords are really popular for live.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they have the Nord stage. It's like a really good piano. So and synthesizer basically as well. But
I mean, there's so many other synths, but I always see that device. That's always there. And you got to respect that when that happens. They got something right.
Yeah. They made a workhorse device that's built like a tank that you can take on the road, that has great piano sounds and great vintage, basic keyboard sounds, and then also has some synthesis too, and mostly, yeah. And so you'll see a lot of guys that go on the road that need something that's like invincible, basically,
right,
out there, and that sounds great. And so I mean that's really been their mainstay. I think they haven't really crossed over into the world of like, I've never seen a Nord modular device or anything, but like. But they have that other world zipped up, man. That is like, I would do the same thing. Honestly, if I needed just a really hardcore keyboard that had great piano sounds, electronic piano sounds, some string sounds, blah, 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 some synth sounds, that's bulletproof, that's fun to play, that sounds incredible. I mean, that's your device right there. So I think that's what, that's where they found their niche for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's like getting,
there is a Nord modular.
A backline Fender Twin or something. Like they're ubiquitous, or a Hot Rod Deluxe or something. They're just everywhere, and they're solid and they hold up.
Yeah. Well, before you're everywhere, you got to be somewhere.
Well, right.
That's
right.
Like I said, I'm seeing guitarists start to experiment with hex systems. There's a friend of mine who has a company in the Philippines, and he makes these little individual pickups that guitarists are buying and going to luthiers and sort of, arranging to have instruments made with those. And then they're buying hex processing systems. And you can even, fan out and have different stomp boxes on different strings and different, and this is a big area of experimentation. One thing that I'm doing with the MPic is I am opening it up to some experimentation, and I think that might interest people a lot. Basically, you can use the MPic as an interface to the string as a string controller, and then you can do a lot of digital signal processing even in a digital audio workstation.
Can we get back to, I'm sorry, Paul, but can we get back to something you were telling me earlier about, which has totally tweaked my interest about drums?
Yeah.
And the application of the technology to that. If we were to apply some sort of transducer and inducer to the actual drum head itself, would there be a way to do the same type of thing where we could control the amount of resonance and harmonics, right? I mean, we could, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I could hit a drum and have it be dead and have it like super fundamental, based in terms of its overtones, or I could hit a drum that had a little more resonance and I could choose overtones. You think could we do that on a drum head?
Yeah, you most definitely can. The question is, see, this raises something that I've wrestled with a lot, and that is, you have all these axes of control, all these individual harmonics. How do you surface that to the musician in a way that is usable? And in a lot of cases, like in the case of a drum head, you may be able to, hit the drum in different locations in order to evoke those different harmonics, rather than having to have a more indirect control system that is, that has some visual thing on a computer screen where you're sort of dialing in the harmonics.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You want to have
it's not a string, since it's a membrane. It's a different.
Yeah, but you want to be a musician. I mean, you want to play the thing.
Right? But I'm a drummer. Drummers aren't musicians. Everyone knows this. I mean, let's at least establish the baseline. Drummers are not musicians.
Are we referencing the joke? What do you call the guy that sits between two musicians?
What do you call the person that hangs out with musicians? How do you know when the drummer's riser is level? When the drool runs out of both sides of his mouth?
And before anybody
gets
upset, we'll just concede that Tim is the biggest musician of us all here. So,
oh God, no.
Well, I was going to say this explains why you've taken up the keyboards, because you just couldn't take the abuse anymore.
Well, that was a bad strategy. You should have gone for guitar or singing.
Right? Harmonica. I know. I never learned. But anyway, so I was just curious about that, Paul, because, Cryss, go ahead.
It's interesting because it would give an acoustic instrument presets, for sound, which, was done on the Vo-96. Like, and one of the things that really caught me off guard is because, when you're dealing with like older sustainer type devices, this just causes sustain. It's very simple. There's none of the harmonic stuff. It's kind of a pain in the butt to use. It's big and it's clunky and it's got the string guides. It's not the greatest thing for doing all this stuff. But you know, thinking about the transition from like the Vo-96, where it's a pretty big install on a guitar. I mean, it works perfectly on acoustic, but I couldn't get that thing up on my Gretsch or something, you know. But then to have it go to the format. I mean, maybe you could. Like
yeah.
But
one thing I want to point out is like the Vo-96, that form factor and everything. This is me experimenting. This is not my current idea of what this thing would be like. I wanted to try a bunch of stuff, and like, you know, what I'm doing is mostly I'm demonstrating a technology. I'm not saying that it has to be productized in this particular way. I'm saying there's a technology here. You know, you can make it almost invisible on an instrument. You can make it conventional. You can, instead of the Vo-96 user interface, which actually I don't like at all. I don't consider it a successful experiment. I think a musician needs things that they can grab onto, physically feel, turn. You know, that visceral connection has to be maintained. And I tried going in the other direction. And when you're actually playing, it's just awkward to control it because you got to look at the lights, you know, and it's not the way it should be. And I sort of taught myself that you know, I proved that case to myself by doing the wrong thing. But you know, the technology, the EBow, I have enormous respect for the EBow. Greg Heat and I are friends. We've talked. Greg is one of the people patiently waiting for an MPic. And, you know, the EBow is my friend Joel de Guzman, who has that company Sci-Fi that's doing some hex pickup suitable for hex processing. The company is Sycfi, S-Y-C-F-I Research. You know, we were joking around, and you know, the joke about me is I don't do simple. But the EBow is simple and effective, and it's a wonderful, wonderful device. And it was patented, I think, in 1976. Patents only last 20 years, which is why there's imitators now, you know, other little handheld things. But it has been virtually unchanged. It's like this thing that does what it does, and it's right, and people use it, and they do, you know, amazing, wonderful things with it. So I just have tremendous respect for that. It's simple, and it doesn't change. And that there's a paradox in all of this equipment, and I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about this. If you have a virtuoso violinist, you know, if 3 days before the gig, that violinist downloaded a software update that changed the way their violin worked, they couldn't be a virtuoso anymore. To be a virtuoso, you have to have this thing that stays the same for a long period of time, so you can neurologically sort of meld with the instrument and achieve this level of perfection. The constantly changing instruments and updates and all of that actually work against that virtuosity. Now, you're all kind of in the synth world. What's your feedback to me on that? How do you deal with that when things are always changing? What happens?
Marshall,
it's a huge pain because you're always looking stuff up in the manual. And like the biggest problem is like when an update comes out and it changes the way your patches sound. That happens sometimes, and it's very annoying.
So you deal with it, but you recognize it as a problem, even if it's better.
Yeah,
it's still,
they'll add features and stuff, which is great. But you know, at the same time, if it's going to mess up the sounds that I have, like that's not a fun time. And sometimes you can get feature fatigue where there's too much. So you just kind of end up using kind of what you need, I guess. And you know, there's stuff in here that I'm sure can do stuff I don't even know about because some of them are pretty deep, you know.
Pretty much every computerized product I have engineering applications that have things that I've never, explored. I have, every DAW I've used has got a million things in it that, I never get to. It's this depth thing. And then there's this EBO, and the EBO is what it is, and it's never changed. And I just, if you can make a product that survives, 50 years and never changes, and people still love it, I think that's an enormous accomplishment. Not something I'm ever likely to do. I'm just not wired that way. But hats off to Greg Heat for the EBO, for sure.
Yeah. I think the lesson there with the updating thing, I'm sorry, Cryss, is just never update any device before you actually need to use it within 2 weeks. Like, give yourself like a good fortnight to use an old standard, like 14 days or so.
Yeah.
And then don't do it, because super guilty. So that's why I'm sort of the poster boy for that, I guess. But Cryss, I'm sorry, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I mean, coming to human psychology for a moment, like there's two trends in people. Everybody has both of these aspects, but half the population falls one way and the other half falls the other way, and that's if you could think of it as gather and organize. And so, gather is good because you're taking in new, you're progressing, you're moving, there's different, it may spark new creativity, all that kind of stuff, but there isn't the need, within gather, there's not as much organization, the strengthening of a single skill, the narrowing down, whereas with organized there is, and it can be very narrow, and you can play that one instrument your entire life, but then that by necessity it restricts everything else new from coming in. And so we have both of these things in our personality, and there's one of those things that we favor. And so to kind of look at like that, how do we have the balance? Because I don't think you need to play the same guitar your whole life like Willie Nelson or Brian May, but you don't have to play 40 different guitars in a concert like The Edge. It's, we can have both of those, and with devices, I mean, to look at these things, like you can spend a long time mastering one particular instrument, and like there's the old saying, beware the man with just one gun, because he probably knows how to use that one really well. And something like the EBO, there's so many people that are using it, and it's so ubiquitous that knowledge of it, I think, helps other people to pick it up and figure out how to use it. But there are times where you got to go into new directions too, and take into new, and I think virtuosity can come in both that gather and organize type of mindsets. I think we're used to thinking of it from the classical world in that sort of that organized mindset of narrowing down, of playing that same thing, of doing doing that one thing your whole life and really become an expert at that, like these great classical musicians. But I think we see in the synth world a lot of times, because the technology is such an important part of it, that we see many people that just have an ability to just bound from one technology to the next, and so maybe they're not going to master every single thing like the classical musician about that one instrument, but they'll be virtuosic in the way that they're able to bring all these technologies together and create interesting music.
And I would also just say that some of it in the synth world is more like if you know subtractive synthesis, you can use pretty much any subtractive synthesizer that there is. If you know additive, you could do that. FM, you need a degree in rocket science, but you could learn FM if you want to, So then you can be virtuosic in terms of the style of synthesis that you choose to use as well. And that can translate across multiple instruments.
Mm-hmm. How do you guys, what do you think about plugins versus physical hardware?
I like plugins. I probably probably more than the other two guys, although they use them a lot as well. Again, coming back to how humans are made, like when you look at the population, there are people that are more tactile, kinesthetic in the way that they are just in life. I mean, we've all had that friend that was like overly punchy, in middle school and pushing, and they're looking to exert force on the outer world, and you have other people that are more audio in their learning modality, and they want to hear things, and others are more visual, and so. It does create different opportunities within these different ways that we learn and that we like to interact. And I think sometimes I notice in the synth world that there doesn't seem to be as much understanding for other types, like the kinesthetic and audio versus the tester and visual seem to be more heavily favored. And like, I want to put my hands on stuff and turn knobs. And I mean, this thing's amazingly brilliant. It's got so many knobs and it's such a great interface. But when I'm using some of my other synthesizers, the interface doesn't give me a lot of information. And so having an editor open on a screen where I can visually see everything that's going on is fantastic. And for programming, using a trackpad to program a virtual synthesizer is not as fun and maybe not as easy as doing it on a piece of hardware. But then the thing about it that's great is that I can only see so much. Even I think the Moog one has the greatest user interface of any synthesizer that I've ever played. But even on this, I can only see so much information at once. And there's again, there's things that you give and take. I love working in front of a computer, and I've got my guitars and my synthesizers to do that, and using effects in the box are a hell of a lot easier than hooking up my hardware effects. But it's not that in the synth world, I'm in the minority. Like tactile tends to be, I would think, the thing that people really connect with synthesizers over. And that's not to say that I don't as well, because I love sitting in front of a synthesizer that has a great tactile interface. What do you guys think about it?
Is there a dividing line between live performance where you have to get to things immediately versus sitting in front of a computer and working things in a creating music in a non-real-time environment? That plugins and things are more favored in a non-real-time environment, maybe, whereas reaching for grabbing a control and turning it makes more sense in a real-time environment. Is that a distinction?
For me, so for recording, I'd absolutely agree with that, plugins. But when it comes to playing guitar live, I've got a pedal board and I'm turning knobs with my feet, and just to be able to. I don't have fancy switching system because I want to be able to have control and do that. So I would say yes, but
I agree. Actually, I think that when I sit down to do something that's not live, a studio produced track or whatever, it is easier to just throw some plugins on and see what comes out. And then you can rotate in hardware if you need to as well. So I do sometimes, though, think that it is a little easier with the plugins.
And for me, it's going to be kind of a combination of the two things, because I definitely find more inspiration with a tactile device, with a synthesizer right in front of me where I can see the layout, and visually I kind of know what's happening if it's reflecting what I have up, hopefully. And that's just a more immediate thing, and it's just more fun for me. So I get more inspired, I think, by having that happening. The difference would be an ease of recallability and editing. So it depends on what my end game is. If I'm just doing something for fun or whatever else, but if I'm working for someone else, that's a different thing. Then I'm going to tend to use plugins because they can still sound great, but I can do minutia editing and pull them all back up, and everything's right there, and I don't have to worry about, oh darn, I moved my OB6 over here for a second or whatever like that. Yeah. It all just pops up on the screen, and I can immediately like reproduce everything, and I can do edits and all of that. So for me, it's really more the end game that matters. In the front end, though, I do like the tactile thing, sure. Like, everyone probably does, but I do love having a synth in front of me. It just feels deeper. It feels harder. It feels better, So I do love that.
So the thing that I find that I'm drawn towards is the idea of the instrument itself being the user interface. And all instruments are like that to a degree. I mean, when you're playing the drums, depending on how you hit it, the angle of the stick, everything, you're getting different sounds out of the drum, and you're doing that in an immediate, visceral kind of way. But you're really doing something that could be done, if you had an electronic drum where you're just like hitting a key, and if you don't do anything else, it's always the same sound. But meanwhile, over here, you've got a screen and you're selecting, different UI situations that change that sound. You see the correspondence between that and actually hitting different areas on the drum. I view the guitar string in the same way. Like, guitars, right, depending on where you pluck the string, how you pluck it, there's a guy like Richard Smith, who we had on at the beginning there in that segment. I've seen him do these amazing fast arpeggio bell things. He'll play this complex chord and he'll run along with his right hand and he'll hit this whole series of harmonics perfectly. And he's hitting the same string. He's using the string as a user interface. He could be just plucking the string, and over here on a computer screen, he's selecting those harmonics. But no, he's doing it live. So in order to make complex systems accessible to musicians in the act of playing, I really favor trying to find ways to use the actions that you are involved with when you're actually playing the instrument and mapping those actions onto different sounds. I think that's to me a more fascinating way, especially for guitarists, because both hands are kind of occupied, so it's
I know about occupation, having four limbs and all of them being busy.
Well, drummers are sort of occupied that way too. Whereas keyboard players, they can wail with one hand and twiddle knobs with the other hand. There's a different thing going on there.
And use their feet too, with pedals or whatever.
Pedals, right, yeah.
Well, it's a remarkable thing about humans is that, when we repeat an action, we're able to learn it, and so. Something like, even if we narrowed it down to like physical interfaces, like like synthesizers, like you can learn how to program and learn how to use Yamaha DX7, and it's a lot of work, but it's not something that's you're unable to do, because lots of people have done it. Program digital on my SSFM, but it's not. You can do it, and you can use that. But also, and you can get that muscle memory, so where it's just like that, and you can be like somebody like Manny Fernandez and just do it. And you can come to another instrument that's also a physical synthesizer, like a mini Moog. And again, they're both physical, keyboard synthesizers. But there is something about like having a great interface or a great way of interacting with an instrument, whereas the DX7 does not have that, but the mini Moog has it in spades. And both have been two of the most popular, synthesizers ever. But that mini Moog kind of invites you into that. And I noticed like that kind of the thought of how you interact with the device has been very important for you, Paul. And I think that's a really, really great thing, that when you're designing an instrument, like you're already thinking about how is a musician going to give and take with this device as they're using it, and what kind of things can you do with it. And that's one of the things I was getting to before, is that move into something like the Vo-1 and the EMpick. kind of opens up all these possibilities for that kind of stuff, and that we saw in Cryss Stack's video. Like, there's so many new things to explore and how to do it with this new device. It's fantastic.
Cryss, by the way, is the friend who helped me a great deal with the Vo-96 Kickstarter. He basically did the promotional aspect of that, and really got the message out there. We had half a page in Der Spiegel on that thing. It was just amazing.
Nice.
It was, it was weird and interesting enough that we got a lot of press for free because it was a novelty thing and people wanted to write about it, and he knew how to make that happen. So I just wanted to give him a shout out for the great effort that he did there. It was really good.
Nice. Well, I mean, we're sort of to the end of our show. We're a little bit beyond. So, I mean, we could go on clearly for a long, long, long time. So,
we could. Are you saying we could sustain forever?
We can sustain.
Or we could just truncate the whole thing right now.
We can reverse the field and damp it all into oblivion. This can happen.
Well, I mean, Paul, it's just been great to have you on, and obviously just so many fascinating elements to these conversations and to music and everything that we're doing. So thanks for being on.
Yes.
I'll let Cryss.
Thanks for inviting me. That was fun. It's been a long time since I've done anything like this. I've been kind of reclusive, but it's this was great. I enjoyed myself. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. And it's funny because when you're out socializing, your invention productivity goes way down. So it makes sense. It does make sense.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Well, hey, what do you all got going on now? What's happened for the next week? How about you, Marshall?
So I've actually been helping the guy that developed Blue Arp. I found a couple more bugs that I'm having him kind of work on for my live set. So I've got the Osmos kind of sitting in the corner right now, but that's coming back as soon as I'm done with some debugging. And that's been a real treat. And that's another one of those instruments that pre-ordered in 2019 and just got here like a couple weeks ago. So, a victim of the chip shortage or chip non-existence, I guess, over the last couple of years. So, but those are out now. So very excited to have that.
That's cool.
Excellent. How about you, Tim?
Well, I had an epic failure on my. I must mention it at least briefly. I had an epic failure on my synthesizer residency at a certain club here in town as they just completely imploded. And go figure. I mean, clubs are they're just hard to deal with. It wasn't on my end. I can guarantee you that. I'd already played 3 shows there, and they'd already jacked me up on a couple. Anyway, long story short, that didn't happen. I'm looking for a new place. I actually have a big community now that's sort of behind me, which feels great, and I can drag them along. They want to come along to wherever my new venue might be, so I am doing that. And aside from that, I'm just trying to finish this really cool but like difficult to do comedy horror short that I'm scoring. So I was supposed to be done by May 1st, and it's May 3rd. So guess who's not done yet? Anyway. Those are the things on my plate for this week. Yeah. It's cool. It's fun.
Well, I'm actually loosely collaborating with a guy in Finland too. On he's done all the work. I had a schematic a circuit that I figured out. Oh, it's got to be 15 years ago now. That I always wanted to try. And this guy got a hold of me, and we got to talking, and we had a couple of Zoom conversations, and he's got the skill set. Make a long story short, he's turning the circuit into a pedal. And he's going to see to the manufacturing and the selling of it, and I may introduce it here in North America, but it's actually a stomp box, and it's a simple circuit that I think is interesting, and sounds good, 100% analog thing, fairly easy circuit. So that's happening, and he sent me a prototype that I need to finish reviewing and make some suggestions that he can follow through on. And I'm doing some work with some other friends on some interesting things having to do with pickups. And meanwhile, I'm waiting to get my MPic circuits back. And when I do, then I can connect them up and see if what was in my imagination actually works in real life, which is always this weird, nervous thing.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Awesome.
Cryss? Fantastic. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to seeing that stuff come out. And I'm real curious about what that pedal is now.
Well, when I have the MPic, the pedal will probably exist at the same time. Maybe I can come back and show you guys the MPic and this strange stomp box from Finland. So
yeah, we would love that. We would love that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Well, I've nothing much for me. Like I said, I'm just recovering from spine surgery. So this week I've just been getting back into the studio and working on a secret track, and that's been fun and that's been good to work on. So,
awesome.
Yeah. Other than that, just want to thank everybody that's been in the chats, been asking questions. Just fantastic to have you all here. If you do us a favor and give us a like on the way out, we would appreciate that, because that's the thing that helps us get out to other people and just make this community bigger. And so also you can join us midweek on our Facebook group, Thru Port Collective, and we're on Instagram as well if you want to pop over there and follow us there. And we'll be looking forward to seeing everybody next week. Again, thanks to Mr. Paul Vo for coming on with us. And what a fantastic discussion that we've had. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to talking to you again.
We didn't even get on to relativity.
We got so much to talk about still. The Vo drive and the Vo warp drive. And
well, yeah, that was my opening. I should have jumped on that warp drive opening.
Well, you'll know next time.
Yeah, no, I wasn't quick enough.
We appreciate you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I really enjoyed myself.
Awesome.
Have a good night.
All right. Everyone take care.
Make us disappear.